Let me take a moment and talk about Riverside.fm. It allows you to record studio quality audio and up to 4K video. When you need to record audio and video, Riverside.fm can do it. So if you're looking for a hero platform for all your recording needs, from podcasts to webinars to any video content, Riverside.fm. I've got a promo code for you where you'll receive a 30% discount on the first 3 months of your subscription. I'll give it to you twice. The promo code is SHIPIT. All one word, SHIPIT, and you'll pick up a 30% discount on your first 3 months of your subscription. Riverside.fm.
Happy Memorial Day, everybody. We have a special bonus edition to explain what Memorial Day is all about. It is remembering those service veterans that died in action fighting for our country. And today we have some football's fallen heroes, and we have Ray Durbin from Row 1 Brand Sports coming up in just a moment. This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history on a day-to-day basis. This is your host, Darren Hayes, and we're podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron, one day at a time. So with Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff supplying us with the dunes, let's go no huddle through today's football history headlines and birthdays of Hall of Famers.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of PigskinDispatch.com once again, and welcome to another bonus edition of the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch podcast. And we have a special Memorial Day salute to our fallen heroes from the gridiron. And to help us with that today, we have Ray Durbin, and Ray is the owner and operator of 47 Straight, which features the Row 1 brand of products. Row 1 brand, which was established in 2013, is an American sports brand based out of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and they offer sports fans historic sports ticket art reproductions, unique sports gifts, watches, and apparel designs created from the greatest sports tickets and program cover art in the history of sports. And let's bring Ray in right now. Ray Durbin, welcome to the Pigpen.
Well, thank you. I'm very happy to be here today, Darren, and have the opportunity to be on your podcast.
Well, we're excited to have you because this is in some preliminary talks of how we could come up with a topic to have you on. You came up with this brilliant idea of recognizing our football's fallen in the great wars on this Memorial Day. What an appropriate setting that we're airing this on Memorial Day, and we appreciate the thought that you had and are glad to do this with you.
Well, I appreciate it. The only thing I would maybe challenge is the qualifier brilliant, but I think it would be a good program because of the historical intersection of sports and patriotism and military service throughout our country. And whether it's baseball, hockey, football, basketball, all the athletes in the various sports, whether they're amateur or professional, have contributed a great deal during the periods of time that we've been in conflicts. This particular program, as we discussed, though, will focus in on football athletes and particularly professional football players who gave their life in service of the country.
Absolutely. Well said. But before we get into some of our fallen heroes, we'd like to learn a little bit more about Ray Durbin. Now, what path led to you becoming a great fan of football, Ray?
Well, from the time I was a little kid, I had an older brother who was extremely interested in sports, and he got me hooked on playing, pickup games of baseball and football, basketball, whatever it might be. I grew up around the Detroit area in the 50s, so I had an opportunity to watch my Lions and Detroit Tigers, Detroit Pistons, and then branched off and, listening to University of Michigan, watching them on television, and University of Oklahoma, Ohio State, various colleges that I kind of followed when I was growing up. I later attended University of Oklahoma. I started out Bud Wilkinson's last year of coaching there. Attended OU, and then I went into the service for a period of time. And after I completed my service, I attended the University of Texas Law School, which at that time, Texas in the early 70s, they had a good football program throughout the 70s.
Well, before we go any further, thank you to your service and to all the other vets that are listening for your service also. This Memorial Day is for you also to honor your great service to the country of the United States, to keep the rest of us free and our way of life continuing. And we appreciate you and all the other vets out there. So thank you, Ray.
Well, I appreciate that. And one thing I did want to indicate too, the fact, and I'm glad you brought that up, the fact that we are focusing in on a subset, really, of athletes. It's even a portion of just all the military veterans who have served throughout all walks of life, occupations, races, gender, and all of those people are not intended to be slighted by any means. But the program is oriented around the theme of your show, and sports always makes interesting subject matter, particularly when it's tied in with, the theme of this program, military service. I wanted to indicate that really this is in honor and recognition of all the veterans who have served.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can't cover all of the gridiron players that had their careers interrupted to service to U.S. military, but we thank them. And we eventually lost their lives on duty. But we hope that our listeners will help maybe anybody that we miss that has that sort of category of, having their football careers, whether the pro or college, interrupted and then lost their lives in service. If you could email us at pigskindispatch@gmail.com, we'll put them on the list as we get them on our blog post. We won't be able to add it to the podcast, but of course the blog post is associated with this. And also we want to recognize that there were countless players from many different wars that had their football journeys interrupted by service to their country. And then many of them were able to return to their careers on competitive levels that they reached. We thank them too. But this is a Memorial Day, so we're going to try to narrow it down to honor just those that have fallen from the realm of football. Just like Ray so eloquently said, we wish we could recognize everybody, but we sort of have to limit it because of the scope of the program. Is that fair enough to say, Ray?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. One thing I would like to state, even though we're honoring some of these players who lost their lives during the war, in reviewing this and everything, I think we can take from them as well as honoring them. I mean, what struck me in reviewing some of their life stories is the fact that we all can learn certain qualities and attributes from the way they lived, like courage, honor, living up to one's oath and commitments, and respect for others and the country. And one thing that has repeatedly occurred, even as late as Pat Tillman, who played on Arizona Cardinals, is the fact that he made a sacrifice, not only, time and all that, but he actually made the decision when he had an offer from the Cardinals on the table for about a 3.5 or whatever it was, $1 million contract. And so he gave that up. And even prior to doing that, he gave that up to enlist in the service after 9/11. Prior to that, the Rams had come to him and offered him a $5 million contract, and he turned it down out of loyalty to the Cardinals. And this same theme occurs where a lot of the players in the NFL and everything during World War II and even after World War II would have been in an ROTC program in college and everything, and they were really good athletes, and they had an opportunity to, I hate to use the term weasel out of service by, having strings pulled and everything like that. But they, repeatedly a theme was, well, I made an obligation and I want to fulfill it.
Yeah.
I think we can learn a lot from their life stories of these players.
Yeah, very, very well said. Tillman, I guess, he's a good one to talk about because he is very familiar to probably the majority of our listenership, because, it's just less than 2 decades ago that he made a sacrifice after the war in Afghanistan started. He, when with his elite Rangers in Afghanistan, lost his life on May 28th, 2004, in some fire that took place over there. He went in to serve with his brother, I believe, too, in the U.S. Rangers. They both enlisted at the same time.
That's right. My information is that his brother's name, I think, was Kevin.
Correct. That's correct.
I don't want to misstate his brother's name, but from what I understand, they were extremely close. And Pat Tillman was very close with his whole family, including his wife that he had recently married. They had been, dating and sweethearts throughout high school, and they subsequently married before he went into the service. He was an overachiever from the standpoint of in looking at his stats and everything. He played really hard, and he was only 5'11", I believe. He played linebacker at 5'11" for Arizona State, and he was just a real energetic and played hard and determined. And he was able to become, I think he was a Pac-10 Defensive Player of the Year his last year there. And then when he was drafted by the Cardinals, they switched him over to safety. And he started, I believe, 6 of the 10 games that first season he played. And he was also not just an athlete, but he was a student, and academically, he made a lot of academic All-American teams and honors and that. He had when he was at Arizona State, he had a 3.85 grade point average, and just excelled at whatever he put his mind to. So he deserves, I think, a lot of respect and credit for the life he led. And he's a good example for all of us.
Yeah, most definitely. Like you stated earlier, he let go between $3.8 and $5 million on the table. So it wasn't money that drove him there. I'm sure the salary of a U.S. Army Ranger is much less than that and a much more dangerous job. But he went to serve his country, the patriotism he had, and as well as his brother and all the other fellow servicemen that went to Afghanistan, a very hostile place, especially at that time where people weren't regarding U.S. citizens in very high regard, especially U.S. military. And he knew what he was getting into, but his patriotism just outweighed any monetary value he could have gotten in the NFL. His call to duty, I guess, is the best way to put that.
Right. And I guess in looking over some of this material, again, focusing in on NFL players primarily, this constant theme of a commitment, an obligation, duty, honor, it extended not only into their military service, but before that in their sports careers. I'd like to give an example, if I could, and talk
Absolutely.
about a particular player, which I found very, very interesting. A guy by the name of Al Blazes. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right.
I think so.
And he was a real interesting individual. He played on the New York Giants, and I'll back up a little bit. He was born in 1919 in New Jersey. He attended Georgetown University. And he was just maybe a marginal football player. He kind of got started in such a way that it wasn't tremendously outstanding. But by the time of his senior year, he was All-American for Georgetown. Now, what was interesting about this guy, in my opinion, is for the period of time during World War II and prior to World War II, this guy must have seemed like a giant. He was 6 feet 6 inches tall and 250 pounds.
Well, he played on the appropriate NFL team then for being that size, right?
Exactly. He could play. He could. There's no question in my mind that he would excel today. And the thing about him, he was also an outstanding track and field athlete. He had the record, the AAU and the NCAA record for shot put for 3 consecutive years while he was at Georgetown. And he was actually training or considering training for the shot put in the Olympics. He was that good. When you win the championship 3 years in a row in both organizations, you're really good. The other thing interesting about him, and we'll talk a little bit about his football after a few incidents in the Army. He came from Lithuanian parents who immigrated to the country. And so he was real gung-ho and patriotic. And so he repeatedly tried to enlist, but they would turn him down because he was too big. At that point in time, he probably wouldn't have any problems now because of the size of the population and everything. But then he must have been a behemoth because they didn't have a uniform that would fit him. They had the special order uniforms for him. But and the Navy turned him down because he was too tall for transports. But he kept pestering him during his last year of pros and after Pearl Harbor in December of 41. He just kept at it. And finally, the Army relinquished and let him join the Army. And they put him in special programs to recreational programs to like coach and do that sort of thing. But he really, really wanted to get into active duty. He wanted to go to the front lines and this kind of stuff. So he finally persuaded them to let him do that. And he went through Fort Benning, Georgia for officers training. And he set the record for a grenade toss. I think it was like 99 yards, which it was 99 point something yards, so many feet. But that's basically the length of a football field, 300 yards.
How appropriate.
Yeah, exactly. And back then they said a really, really good throw for a hand grenade would be about 35 yards. So he exceeded that by almost 3 times. So, but at any rate, that was a story when he was in the military.
Must be his shot put training probably helped him in that too, wouldn't you say?
I think it would. Yes, definitely. So he was. I like Al Bloss's story because he was very patriotic. I mean, he persisted, even being turned down to join the military. He kept at it, and finally was able to get in the service. You know, after he had a training, they also let him. He played basically in 42 and 43 for the Giants. In his rookie year, he was named to the All-Star team, and I think the next year he was All-Pro Bowl or All-Pro. Just an excellent player. That's why I think he could play in any year. And even in 1944 on furlough, he came in and played 4 games in 1944 after he was in the service. And New York Times reported he was one of the 3 best defensive players on the field in the games he played. So, unfortunately, he was shipped over to France, and in January of 1945, he was out looking. He was a lieutenant at that time, and he was out looking for some of his men who had disappeared. They were behind enemy lines on a scouting mission around the time of the Battle of the Bulge, or as part of the Battle of the Bulge. And so he went out looking for 2 of his, a sergeant and a private that were missing, and he was killed by machine gun fire. So, he made the ultimate sacrifice, and I think we can learn an awful lot about his life.
Yeah, definitely. He was a hero just for his service, and then being in the Army, he was a hero just for going and trying to find his wounded men. What a great leader. Don't leave anybody behind. The actual citation from the Army about his death says Captain Blazes went into the forest to help rescue a soldier who had been wounded. He was killed at this time by machine gun fire. So just the heroism of that act. Tremendous. He sacrificed his life to try to help another fellow soldier. So, wow.
And he one other thing, a little tidbit about him, which I thought was interesting. We were talking about this grenade toss. And in 1946, after the war, there was evidently a comic. I don't remember ever reading it when I was a kid, but they had a comic called True Comics. And they must have had a comic book about true stories. And he was featured in one of the editions, and he was nicknamed the Human Howitzer. Frank, the throat to tell you. So, yeah, he was one of two New York Giants that were killed during the war. And I think the other individual that I would like to talk about a little bit, if it's okay with you, is an individual by the name of Jack Loomis, who was also a New York Giant. And Loomis's situation is that he had an interesting background. And I almost felt like in reading his story, it almost seemed like he had a little black cloud that would appear over his life every so often. But he persevered and prevailed. And ultimately at Iwo Jima, he wound up winning the Medal of Honor. Not sure about this. He may be the only professional football player that won the Medal of Honor during World War II, but I may be wrong about that. If I could talk a little bit about his background, I think he had an interesting background. When he was born in 1915 in Ellis County, Texas, and he came from a poor, I think he was born on a cotton farm, and he had, kind of a poor economic conditions growing up. But he excelled in all sports. And that's another constant theme with a lot of these players. They didn't just excel in football, but they excelled in baseball and basketball. And like in the case of the guy, Lazos, that we just talked about, track, field. This particular individual was a star in high school in football and track. But he had I was talking about a black cloud that somehow or another would frequently seem to appear. He didn't graduate from high school because his parents couldn't afford to buy him a graduation gown or take graduation photos. So, but he overcame that, and he received a scholarship, a 2-year scholarship to go to Texas Military College, where he finished his high school education in 1937. He then had an offer from Baylor, go to Baylor to play football. And not only was he a good football player, he was considered the best center fielder that ever played for Baylor up to that time. And he made the, all Southwestern Conference baseball team for about 3 years in a row. He received an AP honorable mention for All-America team in 1938. But just in 1941, when he was getting ready to graduate, Army Air Corps recruiter came to Baylor, and he signed up Loomis and about 30 other students, but it was intended that this would be after they completed college. They would go through a program where the Army had a contract with civilian authorities to train them to be pilots. And he signed up for that. That seemed like a good deal. But I wish we could talk with some of these people. Just before he got ready to graduate from Baylor, he dropped out. So like what happened to him when he was in high school. He in his last year, a month or so before graduation, his grades were fine and everything. He just quit. And he went over and started playing minor league baseball for a Wichita Falls, Texas team called the Spudders. And then he went to that civilian, after about 20 games there, he went to the civilian air training program. He did great. He was doing real well in his training program. He took his first solo flight. Everything went well. He landed perfectly. And then as he's taxiing on the runway or down the runway, he ran into a fence. He clipped his wing with a fence or clipped his wing on a fence, and he washed out of that program. So, I mean, it's his life was kind of up and down, from the standpoint it wasn't smooth sailing. But you have to respect him because he always struggled and persevered. He went up to Wisconsin for New York Giants training camp that summer, and he was one of the 30 players to make the team. So he did go to the Giants, and he played professional football for 1 year. He was on December 7th, the Giants were playing the Brooklyn Dodgers. At that time, Brooklyn had a pro team called the Dodgers. And there was a message on the PA about an attack on, same day, December 7th, by the Japanese on Pearl Harbor. And so he enlisted in the service after the title game on December 21st. He enlisted in the Marines. And after he had basic training in the Marines, it's typical for some of the athletes. Because he was a good baseball player as well, he was assigned to San Diego Marine Corps baseball team. Had that sort of career for a while. Ultimately, he went into the line duty for Marines, and after going to an officers training program, became a second lieutenant, and he was sent out to California. They trained. It's amazing how long we think about it. Whoop, you're in the Army and you're shipped overseas. But during World War II, a lot of times after an individual got in the service, they would spend a great deal of time training as well as unit training. So they might prepare for 3 or 4 months for an invasion that was already planned to occur. And so he was an officer. They landed at Iwo Jima on February 19th. And his initial duties, he was kind of spotting for artillery. And then he started having a rifle company after that. And in terms of a hero, I obviously won the Medal of Honor, but he was wounded by a grenade fragment or something. He kept fighting, and he single-handedly, he was trying to urge his men on everything. He attacked separately 3 different machine nests or pillboxes. And he would throw grenades, and then he would use his rifle to try to, put down suppressing fire. And he wound up kind of wiping out 3 machine gun nests single-handedly. Unfortunately, he was shot, killed. He wound up getting a Medal of Honor. But when he was wounded, they took him into the aid station, and he famously told the doctor, I don't know if you heard this story, that he was mortally wounded, but he told the doctor that, well, Doc, the New York Giants lost a mighty good end today. Received all sorts of awards and honors, including Medal of Honor. But all these players, they just seem to persevere even if they have a difficult circumstance, like having to drop out of high school. I'd love to be able to talk with some of these people. I really would. You feel like saying, why did you drop out of Baylor with about a month left? Why did you do that? And I'm sure there's a reason, an explanation for it. But
Right. I mean, just think about with him taking out single-handedly, 3 machine gun nests or pillboxes on Iwo Jima. Just think about the countless lives he probably spared by doing that of his fellow servicemen. That's true heroics there. And he ended up ultimately paid the ultimate sacrifice for his fellow servicemen. So, wow, deep respect for Jack Loomis, the Giants player from 1941 that unfortunately died in Iwo Jima. Wow, great stories. Glad you brought him up.
Two more quick ones here, and maybe more. But
yeah,
what was interesting, there were 2 other NFL players besides Jack Loomis killed at Iwo Jima, and one was an individual by the name of Smiley Johnson. He was a guard for Green Bay Packers in 1940 and 41. And the story about Smiley Johnson, his real name was Howard White, but his nickname, he went by Smiley Johnson. They said he had a tremendous disposition, and one of his other fellow Marines told the story. A lot of Marines, they'd like to go out and drink and carouse and everything while they had the opportunity. And he would want to go to some soda fountain where he could get a milkshake. And there's a story, and they said he did not drink, and he was very religious. There was a story about Tyrone Power, who's a famous actor, that came in one place when he was having a milkshake, and Tyrone Power came in and wanted to borrow $10, and he was assigned to the military at that time, the Marines, I guess. White or Smiley Johnson didn't know this guy. He said, I need to borrow $10 because he wanted to go. Tyrone Powers wanted to go visit his wife, who was staying at a luxurious hotel or something nearby. Guy didn't know him from Adam. He said, sure, buddy, here's 10, and just pay me back when you get a chance. He said Tyrone, sought him out and paid him back that night. So that was the type of individual he was, and evidently that's why he got the name Smiley. But he had played in University of Georgia for 3 years, 37, 38, and 39, and was a guard. He joined the Marine Corps in 1942, and he was involved in a lot of different battles in the Pacific at various places. And he had won 2 Silver Stars. He had won a Silver Star previously and a Purple Heart, but he also won a Silver Star, second Silver Star at Iwo Jima. So, he was an individual that also lost his life as well as Loomis in Iwo Jima. Iwo Jima, you didn't realize, I knew about it. I knew it was a big battle, but very, very difficult battle, difficult conditions, a lot of soldiers on both sides killed and wounded and everything. And another individual with an NFL background who died at Iwo Jima, this guy by the name of Jack Chevigny. Mm-hmm. I hope that's pronounced correctly.
I think it's close. It's spelled Chevigny.
Chevigny,
I think that's pretty close.
But it's interesting. All these people are extremely interesting, in my opinion. He had played for Knute Rockne in the late 20s. And Knute Rockne said he was the best blocking back he had ever coached. But he was quoted with a famous line. It came out in that movie. I can't remember the name. It's the one where Ronald Reagan played the Gipper.
Is that Knute Rockne, All-American?
Knute Rockne story. Yeah. But in that line, he gave a speech. Sometime when you're down and whatever it is, blah blah blah. That famous speech. Mm-hmm. He said, "Just go out there and win one for the Gipper." Well, that game, that halftime speech was given during the Army-Navy game, where as nip and tuck, Army was ranked higher than Notre Dame that year. And so they went out, and this Jack Chevigny scored. And after he scored, he said, well, there's one for the Gipper. And then the other part, then Notre Dame scored again. He said, that's another one for the Gipper. That's one for the Gipper too. So I guess they really didn't let him forget that in the Notre Dame squad. But at any rate, after that, he was an assistant coach at Notre Dame for a few years. And the Chicago Cardinals hired him as their coach. And the guy must have only been in his mid-30s. I haven't done the math. But he would have been pretty young when the Cardinals hired him to coach. And he wound up, he coached for the Cardinals in 1932. So he must have been really young. But after that 1 year, they didn't have a real good record. Of course, the Cardinals didn't have a real good team. he wound up going to St. Edward's College in Austin, Texas, and did real well there. And in fact, he was there for 3 years, but I think one of the years he was there, or maybe just 1 year, then the University of Texas hired him for a 3-year contract. And Texas played Notre Dame. He was coaching Texas, and they beat Notre Dame. So, at any rate, from there, he left Texas after 3 years and got in a business. Went up to Illinois or Indiana, I guess, and was in the oil leasing business. And then he went into the military service. He enlisted after World War II started out. But he was assigned and went over to Iwo Jima too, and he was killed over there by an artillery shell. He was the executive officer. He was trying to run to the outpost. He was in a foxhole with another football player, and he got up. He was trying to run to the command post to get back there, and a shell hit him and killed him instantly. So there are 3 players that lost their lives during the Battle of Iwo Jima that we've talked about.
Yeah, all true heroes in their own right. Very brave men that sacrificed their life of freedom, and for all of us, to keep it going, especially against the Japanese in that fierce Battle of Iwo Jima. Wow, those are some great stories, Ray.
I think I would like to, and then there's a lot of individuals here, but I don't know how we're doing on time. I would like to talk about a few special players, and then we can maybe back up if we want to catch some of the other ones.
Sure.
One individual that I think is, he didn't actually play professional sports, but he certainly had an offer to do it. I'd like to talk a little bit about a guy by the name of Niall Kinnick. It's N-I-L-E like the river, and last name is K-I-N-N-I-C-K. But he was the 1939 Heisman Trophy winner, and played for University of Iowa. His background, again, he grew up in Iowa, and when he was a senior, his parents lost their farm and lost all the property and everything. They had to wind up moving to Omaha, Nebraska. But he was a good athlete in a lot of different areas: basketball, football, baseball. And he wound up, when they moved to Omaha in his senior year, he was all state, and wound up playing at the University of Iowa. What's interesting about Kinnick, and why I think it's kind of interesting, he played American Legion baseball, and he was a catcher. And when he was catching in American Legion baseball, his pitcher was a guy by the name of Bob Feller. You probably heard of him. Who was an outstanding pitcher on the Cleveland Indians, and started out pitching for the Indians when he was about 17 years old, which is hard to believe. He was still in high school. So after his junior year of high school, he went up and started pitching for the Cleveland Indians, and then came back and completed his senior year of high school, and then went back to the Indians. But I think it was Bob Feller or Fellers that was signed by a scout who really, really, really wanted him. You know what Feller's signing bonus was?
No idea.
$1 and an autographed baseball. And that, I mean, now you talk about a frugal scout.
I hope it was like a Babe Ruth baseball or something. That was worth some money.
I don't know. It's probably a scout autograph. But we talked about the fact he was very good athlete. What I find interesting, this school he played for over in Omaha, it was Benton High. I thought, I've never heard of the mascot by that name. It was the Benton High Bunnies. That doesn't strike fear in everyone's heart.
Yeah, that's ferocious.
So, one thing about Kenny is there's some, I've been a pin this down. I've heard different stories. He wanted to play for Minnesota Gophers. This after he got out of high school, but Minnesota was just a really, really, really strong college football team during the 30s. Won 2 or 3 national championships. I don't know, all in a row, but during that time period. What I heard was he went up for a tryout, and the coach said, "No, you're too slow. you're not any good." So he wound up going to Iowa. Now, that's in dispute by some people. It's like, nah, he didn't want to go there. But, I think all indications are that Minnesota didn't want him. So he went to University of Iowa. He did okay. He did okay his first year. Because I don't think freshmen were eligible then, but first year of eligibility, he did well. His second year, he hurt his ankle at the beginning of the season, and he didn't get medical treatment. He was a Christian Scientist, and he'd just wrap his ankle up and wrap it up and do all sorts of things. And some people speculate that he played on a broken ankle all year. But
wow.
Then in 1939, before the 1939 season, I want to really, this is my last year. I've been preparing for football to do this for 15 years, and I want to really, I want to be the roughest, toughest all-around back yet to be in the Big Ten. And so that year he did extremely well. And the Hawkeyes that year had a pretty good season. They wound up 9th in the AP poll. This is in 1939. And they beat Notre Dame that year, which I think the score was 7-6 or real close, something like that, a point difference. Maybe it was 14-13. But they won that game and, probably set him up for the Heisman Trophy. But he was considered to be really a tremendous back. And what's interesting back then, the size of some of these players and everything, they weren't as big as they are now, but they didn't have a lot of adipose, polite way of saying fat tissue on them either. They were just, solid and strong. Some of the records he set, according to this 14 school record for Iowa, 6 of which still exist. Now, what was interesting about him, he didn't just win the Heisman. He was consensus first-team All-American. He won the Big Ten MVP, won by the largest margin in history. He won the Maxwell Award. He won the Maxwell Award. He won the Walter Camp Memorial Trophy. He was AP Male Athlete of the Year, beating out Joe DiMaggio, Brian Nelson, and Joe Louis. That's pretty strong company to be in for an amateur. And then, like we said, on November 28th, he was awarded the Heisman Trophy. If anyone ever gets a chance, you can on YouTube, you can actually see his Heisman acceptance speech. And not only was he a good athlete, he was a very good student. And I mean, you could tell by his acceptance speech. He had a 3.4 grade average. He was Phi Beta Kappa. Graduated with distinction. And he was the class president at University of Iowa. Not only was he class president at University of Iowa, they had a conference or a group of all the Big Ten class presidents, and he was selected to be the president of the president. So he really had a successful college career. He played in the All-Star game in the summer of 1940. He was a leading vote getter in the college All-Star game. And the Packers won that 45-28, but he scored 2 touchdowns and kicked 4 extra points. All 28 points scored by the All-Stars was when he was in the game. And so when he was out of the game, they didn't make a first down, the All-Stars. So, and that's something, by the way, that I used to really, really enjoy watching the college All-Star games against world champions, or whatever it might be. And a lot of times Packers, Lions, different teams, Baltimore Colts. It was always fun to watch those games. And in the early games, a lot of times college all-stars could win or come close or put up a fight.
Yeah.
But my understanding is they canceled those because of just the potential for someone to get hurt on either side. College player before they start their career off, they get hurt, or a veteran pro that world championship team is going to, depend upon gets hurt in one of those games. So,
right.
But that was as far as his athletic career. Then he, I think I probably didn't mention some of the honors. They named the Iowa Stadium after him in 1972. They dedicated Iowa Stadium, and now has his name. And what he did, Kenny enlisted in the service, and he was a pilot in training, and he was going to be a naval pilot, and he died in a training crash off the coast of Venezuela. His airplane ran into mechanical problems, so rather than trying to land on the aircraft carrier and everything, he just kind of, tried to land in the sea. Now that was standard. My understanding is that was standard procedure back then. You don't want, if you have a problem on your plane, if you can't land or don't have a realistic chance of landing on the carrier, they wanted you to try to safely land in the sea, which I don't know how often that would occur, but otherwise you jeopardize, doing significant damage to the carrier.
Right.
So
it was interesting. It was interesting. You talked about his, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but you mentioned his Heisman dinner acceptance speech, and he almost had a little bit of a foreshadow of what he was intending to do, because in it he said he was glad that he was born in America because we have football fields instead of in Europe where they had battlefields at the time. And he even went on to say, football players of this country had rather battle for such medals as the Heisman Trophy rather than for medals as the Croix de Guerre or the Iron Cross. So that's just some interesting foreshadowing he had in his Heisman speech.
Right. It was. Now, one thing I did mention, he had an opportunity. I forgot, and I'm trying to think what team it was that offered him. Back then, it was a significant amount of money. He was offered, I believe, $1,000 a month as an NFL contract, and he turned it down. And instead, he elected to go start law school and went to 1 year of law school. But that was a large contract back then. I'm trying to think. I read about one of these players, and I thought, my goodness, it was like $100 a month. So they really, really had to love what they were doing, had to love the sport. Of course, $100 went a lot further than it does now, but still, that was not a great deal of money.
It's better than $1 in a signed baseball.
Baseball, that's for sure. That's for sure. That is absolutely correct. But I would like to, I don't know how much time we have. There's one more particular individual I'd like to talk about a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
A wild man. There's an individual by the name of Young Bussey, Bussey.
Okay.
And he was a very, very, very good athlete. But he was born in 1917, and he was the youngest of 7 boys and 3 girls. In high school, he was like everything. He went to a high school there. The family moved from a smaller community to Humble, Texas, I believe, Humble, which is outside of Houston. Interestingly, 2 of his classmates, one was Walter Cronkite, the radio TV broadcaster. And the other guy that was very, very interesting was this Dr. Cooley, who did the first artificial heart transplant in the U.S. And in fact, that guy, that doctor wrote a preface to a book about Bussey, I believe. But what was interesting about him, he was just really a super athlete. and he was recruited by Huey Long to attend LSU. And Huey Long was a politician, governor of Louisiana at the time, kind of a firebrand type. But he recruited a guy to go play at LSU, which he did. But he, the funny story was he had a successful college career at LSU, and he was drafted by the Bears. So he reminded me, who was a quarterback that played Brigham Young? What was it? Kind of brass guy on the Bears, had sunglasses.
You're not talking about Sid Luckman. I think he was a little early.
Yeah, in fact, he's involved in the story. Well, it doesn't come to me now. This is a guy that played in the 80s, I believe, when the Bears won the Super Bowl.
Jim McMahon, you're talking. Jim
McMahon. He reminds me of Jim McMahon. Bussy went into George Halas's office, or actually into his dressing room, and he said, "I'm here to be a winner." And so my question to you is, are you going to trade Sid Luckman to another team, or do you want him to be my backup? And so Halas reacted by shipping this Bussy up to the Newark Bears. Sort of a team he had acquired.
That'd be like somebody going
minor league team. Yeah.
That'd be like somebody going to the I guess now the Buccaneers and telling Coach Arians, "Hey, I'm here to replace Tom Brady. He's going to be my backup." Yeah,
exactly. Exactly. But this guy was evidently really good. He went over to the Newark Bears and was a leading quarterback in that league that he played in. So the next year, the Bears bring him back, but he was still a backup. But according to this, because he was so brash, some people might say obnoxious, but he was really a crowd favorite. And the first game he played in, Sid Luckman threw 2 touchdown passes, and he threw 2. And then the next week, the same thing happened. Sid Luckman threw 2 touchdown passes, he threw 2. But the crowd loved him because every time he came in, he had this reputation for instant offense. He'd come in, they'd score, then the Bears would take him out, put him out to the side for a while. But anyway, the third year he reported, and I think he reported training camp and played in the All-Star game and everything, but he knew he wasn't going to play anymore, so he went ahead and enlisted Navy, United States Navy. And as far as his military career goes, he was assigned to an assault. He became an officer in the Navy, and he was assigned to an assault transport ship in the South Pacific. And I believe this is correct. He was leading some landing craft in the Philippines, and a mortar hit his ship or landing craft, got caught up on some coral reef, the one he was in. And the Japanese, it was like a sitting target, his ship was. And so they lobbed some mortars in there, and he was blown out of the thing. And some people say he lost an arm, but he kept directing the troops to take cover and, all that until he just kind of disappeared. But he was awarded the Silver Star. So a lot of these people have just really, really went above and beyond the call of duty and, performing their military service. So those are some of the people. Again, you tell me how much time we have.
Well, probably, we want to make sure we're talking about a few things about your products here. So I just want to bring up one more in detail, and that's, Waddy Young, who played with the Brooklyn team, 1930, and 1940. He was killed in a plane crash on one of the first B-29 raids on Tokyo in 1945. And he, of course, was a former end of the University of Oklahoma, played in the late 1930s, went professional and played in the NFL for Brooklyn Dodgers, as we just spoke about. And he played in the NFL's very first televised game on October 22nd, 1939. And he left football on his own accord to become a pilot for the U.S. Army Air Corps at the time, and took his B-24 Liberty bomber over the skies of Europe and logged like over 9,000 airs in the air fighting the Nazis. And then later he volunteered to go to the Pacific Theater to fly against the Japanese and flew the B-29 Super Fortress. And he ended up crashing over the skies of Tokyo where he was trying to assist another U.S. pilot whose plane was in distress. So just another great hero that sort of like Tillman, that left on his own accord to left the NFL and went into 2 different theaters of war during World War II, flying through the air. So another great hero.
He was. I have 2 little tidbits of information about him. Again, a constant theme with most of these professional athletes at that time was that they excelled in more than one sport. And this Waddy Young was a really, really good heavyweight college wrestler, and he was also the campus boxing champ. So, he could, protect himself pretty well, I guess, in a line. But one other little story. You're talking about he was with the Brooklyn Dodgers. At that point in time, Oklahoma State was called Oklahoma A&M, and Waddy played for OU as an end, like you were saying. He was the first consensus All-American at Oklahoma at that time period, whenever that was. But when he was in New York, I don't know whether he met his wife before he went to New York or met her in New York. But his wife had attended Oklahoma A&M. So, and her name was Maggie. So he referred to his wife after they got married as Maggie the Aggie was the name he gave her. But I think I'm glad you brought him up. We talked about Tillman. One of the guys briefly that I had some personal experience with is Robert Calsu, who also played at OU. He was a lineman. Played in the late 60s, mid 60s, and was drafted by Buffalo Bills. In 1967, he was All-American and all that. But 1968, he played for the Buffalo Bills, was their rookie of the year. He was a good offensive lineman. I think I heard he was like 6'2" and weighed about 220 pounds. Maybe he was taller than 6'2", but he probably was taller than 6'2". But they wanted him to gain some weight, so he got up to 250, and that was considered, I guess, massive back at that point in time. Nowadays, they'd say, well, fine, he might be pretty good, but we need to put on about 100 pounds. So.
Right, have a couple more Snickers bars,
And unfortunately, he got killed over in Vietnam in August of 1970. He was doing fire support. He was an officer in artillery and was doing fire support for the 101st Airborne, and was on top of this mountain where they had their artillery. U.S. did, and that was one of the last engagements during the Vietnam War, significant engagement. They were using that fire support for missions they were conducting down in jungle and valley and everything. So the North Vietnamese were extremely interested in trying to knock that out. So they came under heavy fire for weeks and weeks and weeks. And on a particular day, he got killed by mortar. It's kind of sad. He was reading a letter. His wife had their second child, and he was reading a letter in the time about that when the mortar hit. And so that's another fallen hero that we owe a debt of gratitude to.
Yeah, tragic. Now, I'm just going to go through real briefly, not to not to dishonor them, but because of a matter of time here, just go through some of the players that we did not discuss that the Pro Football Hall of Fame has distinguished as NFL players that had died during service. Another Vietnam veteran beside Cal Su was Don Steinbruner, who died while serving his country in Vietnam. He was from Washington State, played offensive tackle in 1953 for the Cleveland Browns. Some other World War II heroes. We have Chet Waterland, who was a halfback for the Cardinals of Chicago and the Detroit Lions, 1942. He was killed in a plane crash off in New Jersey, 1944. Don Wemple also played for Brooklyn, 1941. He was killed in a plane crash in India, 1944. Len Supolsky played for Philadelphia in 1942. He was killed in a plane crash in Nebraska during a training mission in 1944. Gus Sonnenberg played for a variety of teams, including Buffalo, Columbus, Detroit, Providence in the 1920s and 30s. He died of an illness in Bethesda Naval Hospital in 1944. John O'Keefe was the front office man for the Philadelphia Eagles. He was killed in a flying patrol mission in the Panama Canal Zone. Jim Mooney played for Newark and Brooklyn, Cincinnati, St. Louis, and the Cardinals, 1930, 1937, was killed by a sniper in France in 1944. Frank Maher played for the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cleveland Rams in 1941. He passed away in World War II. And Bob Mackert, a tackle for the Rochester Jeffersons in 1925, he also died World War II. Captain Lee Kaziri was a fullback for Detroit in 1937, was shot down near New Guinea in 1943. Alex Ketsko also played for Detroit in 1943. He was killed in France in 1944. Eddie Kahn was a guard, played for both the Boston and Washington Redskins, 1935 and 1937. Died from wounds that he suffered during the late invasion in 1945. And a couple more. Ed Doyle was killed in North Africa invasion 1942. He played for Frankfurt and Pottsville in 1924, 1925. Grassy Hinton played for the Staten Island Stapletons 1932, was killed in a plane crash in the East Indies in 44. And a few more gentlemen. Keith Burlam played for the Cardinals and also for the Washington Redskins in 1939. Was killed trying to land a combat damaged bomber in England in 1943. Charlie Behan played for Detroit in 42, was killed in Okinawa in 1945. Chuck Braidwood played for Portsmouth, Cleveland, the Cardinals, and Cincinnati from 1933 to 1930. From 1930 to 1933, he was a member of the Red Cross, and he was killed in the South Pacific in the winter of 1944-45. And Captain Mike Bosca played for the Philadelphia Eagles. He was killed in France in 1944. So there's just some of the 23 men that played in the NFL, and including Mr. Niles Kinnick and our Steinbruner and Cal Su died in Vietnam, and of course Patrick Tillman that died in Afghanistan. Just some of those great players that had some NFL connection, and we're sorry we couldn't get to some of the college players or get more detail on some of the men I just mentioned.
I have one more guy I want to mention.
Sure.
I don't know where he surfaced from or anything, but a guy named Joe Eugene Rolt, Roult.
Okay.
And he died in 1944 in Belgium. It says he was born in 1914. He played guard for Texas A&M from 1933 to 38. And he was drafted in 1938, round 3 by the Cleveland Rams. It said, and I may have said L. It should. I think his name was Rutt. Rout. He was named to All-American football teams in 36 and 37. And he played on the college team in the 1938 All-Star game in Chicago. I don't know. Even though he's drafted, I don't know if he ever played for the Rams. He may not have played because he had some time in there. He certainly had time to play. But he was in ROTC or I don't know if it's ROTC, actually. It would just be a cadet. I guess it would be. At Texas A&M, almost everyone was in that. So he was drafted, went in service in March of active duty in March 1942. Played after he went on active duty. He played for the Army West All-Star team against professional teams. And during the war, they had quite a number of these service teams, and they would be staffed by former pros or people who had played in college and didn't go pros. They were really stout teams. And so, anyway, this guy won a Bronze Star and Purple Heart. He was a captain and a company commander. He was killed in action in the Netherlands in 1944, December 10th, 1944. And I wanted to put him in. I don't know too much more about him.
No, I'm glad you
really
did.
I'd be interested to find out if he ever played a down or something for, the Cleveland Rams, or whether he got traded or didn't sign a contract or whatever. One last little comment. I did want to give credit for anyone that I'm going to try to track the book down if I can. There's a book put out called American. What's the new name? It's like American Football at War, something like that, where it covers college and pros and some of these people we've talked about. I'll try to track that book down and the name of the author and send it up to you because I'm going to look for it. I'm going to try to find it.
Okay, we'll put it in the show notes of this podcast to listeners so that you know.
I'll try to get that.
Okay.
One other little tidbit. We're talking about service and military and football during World War II. There's so many of these service teams that I think it was 1943 college rankings. The service teams could play colleges, they could play pros, because they wanted. Mm-hmm. But they were eligible to be ranked. And in 1943, that was mind-boggling to me. Out of the top 20 teams in 1943, 7 of them were military related. Of course, you had Army Academy, Army Naval Academy, and then there were 5 other teams that were ranked in the top 20. In fact, Iowa Pre-Flight, which was a team playing out of Iowa, University of Iowa, but Iowa Pre-Flight was number 2, and it was Iowa Pre-Flight Seahawks is what their name is. And the game of the year in 1943, college game of the year, was between Notre Dame and Iowa Pre-Flight. And Notre Dame was nip and tuck and back and forth, and Notre Dame was ranked number 1, and Iowa Pre-Flight was number 2, and Notre Dame wound up winning 14-13 because they missed an extra point. So It was really, really interesting times back in the 40s during World War II.
Right. Well, we definitely thank all those that gave their lives for our country during wartime, sacrificed their football careers to do so. And if we missed anybody that our listeners can think of, please, like I said earlier, email us at pigskindispatch@gmail.com. We will certainly include them on our list to tribute for Memorial Day here on pigskindispatch.com. And, won't be able to be included in the podcast, but they will be honored on our pages at pigskindispatch.com. Now, I'd like to change gears a little bit while we have you on here, because we're a little bit short on time. But I'd like to talk about your company, your Row One brand of products, because they are really uniquely interesting and innovative and really attractive to the sports fan. If you could speak a little bit about your Row One brand.
Sure. Row One brand, we specialize in making a variety of products, from vintage football tickets, programs, scorecards, advertisements, any type of sports-related publication that we're able to find prior to, 1990s. And we take the artwork we have currently. We're adding products daily and adding artwork daily. But currently in our art gallery per se, we have about 4,500 items of, different images. Some is a original work of art or remixed art. Some are exact duplicate copies of the programs, tickets, etc. For example, we have a lot of Army, Navy tickets, a lot of military program covers, most of the major colleges, football, baseball, basketball, hockey, boxing, track, any type of sport. And we take those images and either make them into wall art, which would be either canvas, acrylic, prints, metal, wooden signs for dens and rec rooms and that sort of thing. And then in addition, we have certain images that will not only have the traditional wall artwork, but then we'll use the same image to make mugs, apparel, puzzles, any product that an image can be applied to. And so we focus in on all the major sports, and maybe I'm trying to figure out how we can get chess in there, but I don't know, fit in with the theme. But maybe get an old Paladin card from Have Gun Will Travel or something for the chess aficionados. I'm not sure. And we also focus not just on the artwork, which we think is significant, because some of the cover art and everything are created by major sports artists. But we also try to provide historical setting and background for all these items. So, we have a collection of games of the century in football, first Super Bowl ticket, Pro Bowl tickets, baseball. Like there's certain products I really, really like. One of them I really like is first home game or first Major League Baseball game played in Houston between the Houston team and I don't know who they're playing now, but it was the opening day for the Houston, team at that time. So Colt 45s or whatever their name was. And it's enjoyable because not only can you look at this tremendous artwork, but you can go back and research the history of the game, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I know when I first heard about your Row One brand, and I heard the words that ticket stubs were putting on there, I said, boy, I don't know how that's going to work. And then I went on your website and looked at it, and oh my gosh, these are many of them are extremely glorious, especially these older tickets. I looked at one that really caught my eye is you had, I believe it was a Harvard Yale like 1879 game. It must have been like an advertising poster put on campus or something, but it had sort of a rounded looking ball, more of a soccer ball because it was before the 1880 revisions that Walter Camp made. But just a beautiful, just simple picture of a ball and telling you when the game is and what field it was played on. And, some of the other tickets, like you're talking about the Notre Dame games and the Army games, some beautiful artwork in the background on the tickets that probably were really overlooked because you're looking at it, the ticket stub, where am I sitting at? But there's some beautiful artwork on there and graphics that really look great on the coffee cups and the wall art, like you said, really innovative and beautiful designs, and not only for the man cave, but could probably go just about anywhere.
It does. It's bedrooms, living room, because the art is so varied. I mean, there's so many different types of art pieces.
Yeah, why don't you tell us where can the listeners go to find the Row One brand?
Well, the website, it's probably the best way, is it's just row1brand.com. And if they go to our website, they'll find all the products there. And again, we're, trying to add products daily. I'm generally successful in that. Numerous ones.
It's a wonderful website. There's plenty to look at, and I'm sure the listeners like myself, you're not going to be. You may expect to go there for maybe spend just a minute or two, but you'll get engrossed in it and going through the pages of the beautiful graphics and artwork from all sports. Not just football. We're talking mostly football here because it's Pigskin Dispatch, but you'll really be intrigued by and like what you see, and I'm sure you'll come away there as being a customer of Row One Brand because I know I am. So it's a beautiful site, and we appreciate you telling us about it.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be on your program, and I just listened to a lot of the Sports History Network and various podcasts, everything, and years, and the other shows are very enjoyable. Very informative and interesting.
Well, we thank you for that, and we appreciate you being here with us today, and I don't want to take up any more of your time, Ray, but again, everybody get out there and check out that row1brand.com. Look at Ray Durbin's great works of art there that you can hang up in your house or, drink your coffee out or put on your t-shirt. Really some great and unique gifts. Even Father's Day is a great time to look at some of those things. I know a lot of dads out there will like some of the products that Ray has to offer. And Ray, once again, thank you for joining us here in Pigskin Dispatch to talk about our great warriors that died in service, leaving the football field to do so.
Okay, thank you.
We're taking a peek over at the chains and the down marker. It's 4th and long. We're going to have to punt the ball and get on out of here, but we'll have another series tomorrow for your football history headlines, so be sure to tune in. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast. Pigskindispatch.com is a proud affiliate of the Sports History Network, the headquarters of sports yesteryear.
Are you having a hard time figuring out what to get Dad for Father's Day? You should check out Row One Brand's Vintage Pictorum Gallery. They have America's best sports art. With over 7,200 historic sports prints, you're assured to find something unique for Dad this Father's Day. Instead of a boring old tie, get him a historic baseball photo taken by Henry High Sandom at the historic Polo Grounds Stadium in New York City during the 1894 Temple Cup. Or, if he's an NFL buff, check out the 1963 vintage NFL poster. These are so good looking that you'll be amazed how they turn out. Shop now at sportshistorynetwork.com/row1 and save 15% off your order. Are you having a hard time figuring out what to get Dad for Father's Day? You should check out Row One Brand's Vintage Pictorum Gallery. They have America's best sports art. With over 7,200 historic sports prints, you're assured to find something unique for Dad this Father's Day. Instead of a boring old tie, get him a historic baseball photo taken by Henry High Sandom at the historic Polo Grounds Stadium in New York City during the 1894 Temple Cup. Or, if he's an NFL buff, check out the 1963 vintage NFL poster. These are so good looking that you'll be amazed how they turn out. Shop now at sportshistorynetwork.com/row1 and save 15% off your order.